22222. Hello, good. Okay, some people are in here. That's nice. Nice to see you. Just please use the chat. I want you to use the chat and just say hello to me in the chat, and then I'll be able to see who's in here. So please say hello in the chat. Hello, Tian Tian, Carmel, Nane, Manpreet, Yura, Priya. Who else do we have in here? Ada, Amandeep, Ada, maybe, I don't know. Alia, Janet. Hello, Janet. Shirin. Who else do we have in here? Pop your name into the chat. And while you're doing that, I'm going to get my YouTube live thing happening. I don't know why it's not. Is it live on YouTube? It seems to be. Okay, apparently it is live on YouTube. I can't find the link, but anyway, maybe it'll pop up in a minute. Cool. Oh, there it is. 81 people on YouTube live. That's really cool. Hello, people on YouTube live, including Dr. Alpha, Cindy, Jawaria, Lavanya, Disha, Priya, Dr. Abhishek Kumar, Shiny, Jai, Sujith, Vinaya, Akila, Omar, Farooq, Gino, etc. Cool. Lots of people. Great, great, great. Okay. I'll introduce myself. It's lovely to see all of you, and thank you for attending. This is an Ask Me Anything about OET. Hopefully I will be able to answer anything. We'll see. I feel like my OET information is sort of lost in my brain, but I'm sure I'll be able to retrieve some of that knowledge. My name is Jay. I'm one of the expert OET teachers here at E2 Language. Thank you very much for coming along. We're going to sort of structure the Ask Me Anything. So we're just not going to answer I'm not going to answer random questions. What we're going to do is we're going to do it by category of subtest. So we're going to start by asking questions and me answering questions on the speaking subtest first, okay? So please fire away. What questions do you have on the speaking subtest of OET? I'll have to give you a few minutes to pop your questions in, but yes, let's start with speaking. And I'll probably prioritize questions for people who are live, who are logged into the live class from E2 Language, but I'll certainly get to your questions on YouTube Live as well. Okay, so what I'll do just to start this off is I'll just describe the OET speaking subtest if you don't know. So the OET speaking subtest is actually in the form of a role play or consultation between you and a patient, or the father of a patient, or the daughter of a patient, for example. And it's actually a discussion. So as much as this test is a test of your speaking skills, it's just as much, in many ways, I should say, a test of your listening skills as well, because it also very much tests your ability to respond to the patient, okay? Your responsiveness is critical here. So it is really important that you listen to that patient during your role play. Just in terms of the parameters of the test itself, so you do 2 role plays. You get 2 or 3 minutes to prepare before the role play. You'll be given a task card with a scenario and certain tasks that you need to do. You only need to speak on those quite loosely. You don't need to follow them to the T. And then you have to speak for 5 minutes to the interlocutor. So the person you're speaking to is not an examiner. If you take the IELTS test, for example, and you do the speaking test, the person you're speaking to is the examiner. They're the one listening to you. They're the one marking your speaking proficiency. OET is different. What happens is the person you're speaking to is basically an actor, and they're recording it on a device which then gets sent back to OET HQ, where they then do the analysis of your speech. So if anything, that should make you feel a little bit more comfortable on test day, because again, the person you're speaking to is not the examiner. And it's a bit of a performance. It is a role play. I don't know if you've done a role play before. It feels quite natural. All right, here we go. I'm sorry, it's just me, but I'm gonna try and do this. So, Jay, do we need to start by introducing ourselves in every case? My answer to this is it doesn't really matter. You can introduce yourself and say, hello, my name is Jay. I'm one of the doctors here at XYZ Hospital, blah, 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 blah. That's fine. You can do that. Or if the role play card suggests that you actually already know the patient, you don't need to introduce yourself. You certainly won't lose points. It's not a big deal if you introduce yourself or not, okay? Another question that is commonly asked is, what should I call the patient? Should I ask for the patient's name, etc.? You can if you want, or you can just give them a name. Or in the 2 or 3 minutes preparation time, you can say, hey, excuse me, what should I call you during this role play? And they will say, you can call me Mr. Smith. Say, great, no worries. And then you start the role play and you say, hello, Mr. Smith, nice to see you again. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Priya, Jay, in the speaking exam, if someone is not able to complete the tasks, then OET will penalize that candidate. Okay, great question. So as I mentioned, you're given a role play card, and on the role play card, you have tasks, usually about 3 or 4 or 5 tasks. Each of these tasks asks you to do something like reassure the patient or explain the procedure of blah, okay? So the question here is, Jay, what happens if I don't complete all of the tasks? That's fine. Again, like in IELTS, the role play card is there to guide you. It's not mandatory that you speak on it perfectly, okay? It's just there to facilitate the interaction between you and the person. Okay, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. The other thing is you have no idea how long 5 minutes is because you can't wear a watch. There's no watch in the room. So you just have to get a bit of a feel for 5 minutes. That's probably why it's a good idea to do some preparation before you, even if you're a very good speaker, before your test day, just to get a feel for how to perform well. You don't want to stuff this up, okay? You want to make sure you get the speaking right. Janet, what can you say if you find out that the condition you are to talk about, you have no idea what it is? Okay, so certainly you can ask the interlocutor if you're talking about something you're unaware of. The interlocutor should know what that medical condition is, but more likely is that the condition, the medical issue in the role play card will not be a complex one. It will be one that you're aware of: diabetes, obesity, I don't know, something that's pretty straightforward, okay? Headaches, for example. Good question. Ada, what about forgetting and calling the patient several names? Doesn't matter, honestly, not a big issue. That is not what the OET examiners are listening for. The OET examiners are listening for your linguistic skills in terms of your fluency, pronunciation, intelligibility, word stress, stuff like that. They're also looking for your clinical communication skills. That is, how good your bedside manner is, how well you listen to the patient, respond to the patient, structure your talk. All of that sort of stuff is in the E2 Language website, by the way, if you're curious about how to maximize your scores and how you are scored. Manpreet, should I initiate the task or will the patient ask me? Manpreet, I would suggest that you initiate the task because in this role play, you are the medical professional, and in your workplace, this is a reflection of your workplace. You would walk in and not wait for the patient to talk to you. You would say, hello, Mrs. Smith, nice to see you again. So you do the initiation. In fact, I think you may actually be graded on you initiated the conversation. So make sure you do that. Okay, I'm just reading some of the YouTube live comments and people are asking quite random questions. Okay, here's a great question. Inderpreet asks, Jay, on the role play card in each of the tasks, it actually says in sentences like, reassure the patient that the insulin injection will not hurt too much. So the question here is, how much of that sentence can you copy, or do you have to paraphrase it into your own words? The answer to that is, it's fine to copy it because that will last you 4 or 5 seconds to read that sentence. Remember, you're speaking for 4 to 5 minutes. So no doubt from that, you'll be using your own language anyway. So you might say, Mrs. Smith, I would just like to reassure you that in fact, it doesn't hurt that much when you do use the insulin injection. Okay, so I've basically copied every word from that task on the role play card. I've added some of my own just naturally, but then what will happen is the natural conversation will begin anyway. So don't worry about copying directly from that role play card. Priya, Jay, is grammar also assessed in the speaking task? It is, yes. It's one of the linguistic criteria. So it is graded under your language skills, but it only accounts for a very small percentage. Mind you, if you're making small grammar errors, don't worry, okay? Don't worry about that. The problem is if you're making lots and lots of large grammar errors where the communication is impeded, or the message that you're trying to convey is not coming through because you're unable to express yourself. That's problematic, okay? So if you're making small errors, don't worry about it. If you don't have the grammar to express yourself fully and clearly and flexibly, that's problematic. In that case, if you do have issues with grammar, by the way, check out a website called e2school.com, which we just built, and it has a free grammar course on it, which is really cool. Manpreet, Jay, do I need to demonstrate the task? Like, do I show how to inject the insulin? No, because it's just being recorded as an audio file, so there'll be no visuals, which also means you don't need to worry about eye contact, or, your body language is not being assessed at all, nothing. Guhan, Guhan, is it a must, or should I ask questions about symptoms before jumping into explain, reassure, and so on? You can if you want. Use the tasks on the role play card. There's no set structure for this. Just feel it out. My suggestion with the speaking is it is a simulation of a workplace environment. What would you do in your clinic, okay? Or what would you do in your hospital? So just try to think about it like that. Don't think about it like an English language test. In fact, the way that you're being assessed, the criteria that the examiners used to assess you, was based on real life scenarios of patients and doctors and nurses interacting, okay? And it's best practice for that. So just use your professional skills. How do I start a conversation when the patient is in an emergency? There might be some reluctance from the patient. Sometimes you're given a role play card where the patient will be difficult to manage. Maybe the patient is angry, or the patient is frustrated, or the patient is freaking out, for example. There'll be some sort of linguistic skill there to be able to calm down the patient, reassure them, tell them everything's going to be okay. But it won't be absurd. At some point, after a little bit of getting you to elicit that language, they will then start to communicate. Okay. Cool. All right. A few more questions for speaking, then we'll move on to the big one, which is writing. Ashmita says, don't worry about speaking. Everything will be on the role play card. I agree with you there. Okay, let me ask one more. Okay, I think I've answered those. Okay, cool. Okay, one last question is from Cindy. Jay, the person we are speaking to, the interlocutor, are they nurses or doctors, or do they have any medical profession? No, they are, they're typically English language teachers, but again, they don't need to. They're playing the role of the patient, and they're prepared on that particular role play card. Anyway, speaking's not a big one. Let's move across to writing now. So please pop in your questions about writing. If you have any further questions about speaking, or you're concerned about your speaking, you should think about taking the OET mini mock test by e2language.com. It actually comes with a mock simulated speaking exam with one of our expert teachers, who will then provide you with feedback. So let me just describe to you the writing subtest briefly. So what happens on test day is you are given a set of case notes, right? Usually about 2 pages worth of case notes. These case notes are divided up into different sections, like medical history, social history, recent visit, whatever, various categories. These case notes are profession specific. So nurses get nursing case notes, physios get physiotherapy case notes, etc. At the bottom of the case notes is a task, and the task asks you to write a particular type of letter to a specific individual or an institute, for example. For example, you might be a nurse writing a referral letter to, I don't know, a dentist. Would that happen? Maybe that wouldn't happen. Maybe you're a nurse writing a referral letter to, or a discharge letter back to a nursing home, for example, or a doctor to a dentist, whatever. It's clearly written in the task. And the task asks you to do something. The task will also tell you whether or not you know the recipient of the letter. And the task will give you enough information to guide you through the case notes and help you to select relevant case notes. Relevance is a real key to getting a high score in OET writing, because the letter that you write can only be, well, not only, I shouldn't say that, the word count is not that strict. It should be around 180 to 200 words. You don't have enough time to select all of the case notes, plus only some of the case notes will be relevant to the reader anyway. So there's a selection type of process going on in your brain, selecting relevant case notes. Then you have to organize the case notes into a logical structure. There's two main types of structure that you'll get. One is a main medical issue structure, where there will be a main medical issue and some subsidiary issues. So you will write about the main medical issue first, because you should prioritize important information. The second type of structure you might get is a chronological structure, that is by time, as in patient visited me here, patient visited again twice on this week, finally patient visited here. Here's my what I think needs to happen. There are some elements of the letter that will always be in the letter. For example, the introductory sentence or paragraph will outline the main medical issue and the reason for writing, okay? And the final paragraph will almost always be a request paragraph. Everything between that introduction and the request paragraph depends on the day. There is no template for this letter. Okay, there is no template for this letter. And if you're going into the test on test day with a memorized template, that is, I'm going to write about the medical history, then I write about the social history, then I'm going to write about medications, you will probably fail, because the reason why they have the task is they need you to be able to write flexibly. So if you go in with a set structure and you go in with set paragraph structures, if your teachers have been telling you to use a set template, don't listen to those teachers. You'll need to find a new school. You need to be flexible. Cool. Anyway, that's a bit of a background on that. So let me answer some questions. Tian, I'm a bit confused to pick up the key reason why you want to write a referral letter in the first paragraph. Okay, good question. So that first sentence, first paragraph says something like, you know, patient X will be discharged next Monday. She requires your follow-up attention because of her whatever. So what that is doing is it's outlining a bit of a main medical issue. It's mentioning the type of letter, and it's also very briefly mentioning the request. She requires your follow-up attention, or she requires a second opinion, or something like that. So there's several things happening in that little introductory paragraph at the start. Including that little request that's briefly mentioned. That request then right at the bottom of the letter is expanded upon and given in detail, of which you'll see if you've been doing your practice and you've been writing some practice letters from e2language.com, you'll see that this will all make sense, especially if you've been joining the live classes. Okay, Rocio, I did the mock test, but I didn't pass listening and writing. But in the real OET, I did pass listening and writing. How can I interpret that? It just depends on test day. Language tests can fluctuate in scores lightly. What you should be doing there, Rocio, is paying attention to any errors that our teachers have picked out, any weaknesses that they've found in your writing, and focusing on those. So when you do take the real OET test, those can be fixed. Okay. I'm not going to answer that one, Manpreet. That's a little bit too technical for me. Okay, Mukesh Aghi is online, which is good to see. Okay, I'm going to scroll down on YouTube Live. There's 150. There's about how many people in this thing here? There's about 180, 190 people in here. So if I don't get to your question, please don't be mad at me. I simply can't get there. Okay. Here's a great question. Cindy, Jay, I have a problem with coherence. So I'm able to select relevant case notes, but I just don't know how to structure my paragraphs. Yeah, this is actually, I think this is the major issue that people face when they're writing their letters, okay? So you select your case notes. And what you need to do is you need to think about categories. Okay, so you've selected a bunch of case notes that refer to the main medical issue. Cool. So you're going to pop all of those case notes, you put them over here in a little pile, right? And then you keep looking, you think, okay, there's a bunch of case notes about a secondary issue. So you put those into a little pile, okay? So you've got two little piles of case notes. These are going to become your paragraphs. And then you have a look at the case notes again and you say, okay, it looks pretty clear to me that there's enough information here to write a paragraph about, I don't know, about the patient's home situation, right? So you're going to put a little pile of case notes there. So you've got 3 piles, and then you've got the request, which is a pile of case notes. So you've got these 4 piles of case notes. They become your 4 paragraphs. The problem now is, how are you going to structure these paragraphs? So let's take a pile of case notes. The best way to think about structuring your paragraph from these pile of case notes is to think about priority. What's the most important information? Because that should be prioritized. That should come at the top of the paragraph. And what leads on from that? What's the best next case note that leads on from that? So what you're trying to do with your paragraph is create a logical structure from beginning to end. And what you're really doing with each little paragraph is you're telling a little story, okay? And you tell that little story, and then you get your next pile of case notes and you sort them out, you organize them, and you tell another little story, okay? This is coherence. This is how you get nice structure within your paragraphs. And then what you also want is, in addition to having little stories in your paragraphs that reflect the case notes, overall, you should be telling a larger story about the patient. That's how you should think about it. Because when I read that letter, I want to be reading a coherent story that has an introduction, a middle, and an end, okay? The end being the request. So that's, it requires practice. It requires feedback, I think. Jinsey says, Jay, with the recommendation paragraph, should that be a separate paragraph? Generally, yes. Your final paragraph, which will have the, sorry, not a recommendation, a request, because you're asking somebody to do something, okay? Just be careful with recommending something. It's about a request, okay? You're asking the physiotherapist to do these 3 things, to order a home visit, to install something in the bathroom, and to check the leg for whatever. I don't know what physiotherapists do, but that's your request, okay? That should generally come as a separate paragraph at the end. Marwa, Jay, when's the best time to do the E2 language mini mock test? Anytime, really. Even if your test is in 3 months, it's good to do it now just to get an indication of, sorry, I should say you should have some idea about the test, okay? You should know what the subtests are, what reading part B is, what reading part C is, how the writing works, then do the mini mock test. It gives you a really rich feedback on your performance. It shows you where your weaknesses are and what you need to do to improve. It's also a good thing to do like a week before your main test, just to make sure that you're ready. But to be honest, earlier the better, because you might get a rude shock, you might get a surprise, and you might need to do some homework. But that's good because it'll save you time and money. Okay, here's a great question. Joweria, Jay, does it matter if I don't use complex words in writing? And can I write in simple English? Okay, so if you've taken the IELTS test before, the IELTS test almost requires you to write, in fact, it does. It requires you to write complex sentences. The IELTS test requires you to use complex vocabulary, okay? OET is very different. The main, how can I say this? What you're aiming for in your letter is clarity. You're aiming to be as clear and as readable as possible. You're not writing an essay about space travel or taxation or how the environment can improve from whatever. You're writing a letter to a professional, and you're giving them some information and asking them to do something. Therefore, you are not graded on the complexity of your language. In fact, if your language is too complex and hard to interpret and understand, that is, your sentences are too long, the vocabulary you've used is not precise, or it's too flowery, you'll actually be marked down. Simple, clear sentences and vocabulary is key, which is also a relief, but it's also hard to write clearly. So yes, so do think about that. Sajan, Jay, do E2 language have a 1 month class? My exam date is December. Yes. So our express package can be sort of crammed in a week up to 3 months. It's up to you. Comes with 25 live classes. So that would be a perfect thing for you, Sajan. Fazal, Jay, can you tell me more about the E2 mock test, the OET mock test that you offer on e2language.com? Sure. It's $69 US, significantly less expensive than the actual OET. It's extremely good practice because it gives you test simulation. But more importantly, what it does is it gives you lots of feedback on your performance. So you'll know exactly how you're performing on reading ABC, listening ABC, writing and speaking. And for writing and speaking, you actually get detailed reports from our teachers who have marked your writing and your speaking. The speaking is actually done in a like this online. You do a mock test with one of our teachers who are dotted around the world. It's $69. It's damn good value for money, and it will show you where you're going wrong and what you need to do to go right, which is important. Dr. I love this is my favorite question for today. Dr. Alpha, how to pass the exam in a day? Okay, so I'm suspecting you have done no preparation. That's okay. Go to YouTube. There's a video that I posted last week called Learn OET in 20 minutes. And what it does, it just explains each of the parts of the test in 20 minutes. So maybe you don't even need a day. If your English is really good, we still recommend that you do test practice, because honestly, these tests are hard, even for native English speakers like me, I'm a teacher as well as a native English speaker. I have to really think when I do these tests, especially listening part C. Bam, that one's tough. So if you want to do some last minute prep, just go and watch that video on YouTube called Learn OET in 20 minutes. Okay, here's a good question about writing. Kusum says, Jay, sometimes it's hard to predict whether the recipient of the letter, the person you're writing to, knows the patient or not. This is something I really ask you to keep in mind, because think about case note selection here. Okay, let's say you're writing to somebody who has never met this patient before versus you're writing to that person's doctor. Case note selection will obviously change significantly depending on those two possibilities, right? Because if you're writing to someone who's never met this patient, all of a sudden the medical history might become relevant, for example. Whereas if you're writing to this person's GP, that medical history is irrelevant. That doctor, you can assume, already knows about the patient's medical history. So how do we know this? In the task down the bottom, there will be a clue. Or it will just explicitly state, write a letter to Jonathan's GP, for example. You know that Jonathan knows the GP and the GP knows Jonathan. So just pay careful attention to that and think about, okay, does the recipient know this patient or not? Because that will really transform the way that you write. Select and write the letter. Select case notes and write the letter. Yes, Nettie, the OET comes with a one-on-one with the teacher for the speaking. Okay. Sorry, I'm just reading some questions here. Okay, so Janet's asking, what happens, Jay, if we get a set of case notes that are chronologically listed? Like, it says patient visited on 7th of August, 10th of August, 15th of September, and whatever. So how do you then structure that up? Well, probably you can combine dates together. Say, for example, on the 7th and the 10th of August, the symptoms were the same and the patient was exhibiting the same symptoms. Well, you can say on the 7th and 10th of September, the patient had these symptoms, blah, blah, blah. Then on the 15th, or you don't have to use the date, then you can say 2 weeks later, for example, or 1 week later. You can do a little bit of simple math there just to make your writing a little bit more readable. 1 week later, the patient appeared again and blah, 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 blah. So you can combine, and the way that you write them out into their respective paragraphs, you don't have to use the actual dates. Again, you can say, 1 week later, 10 days later, whatever. Okay, here's a great one. I love this. And if this were a classroom, I'd make you go and sit in the corner and face the wall. Aswani, Jay, can you please share the exact organization pattern of a letter? Haha. No, you can't, because there is no such thing. The organization of the letter depends on the task. It depends who you're writing to, whether that recipient knows the patient or not, what their profession is, with probably those three things there. That's enough that all of a sudden now you have to be flexible and organize the letter in a way that meets their needs. It needs to meet those readers' needs. There is no single format or pattern of a letter. And if you are memorizing one, you will probably fail the exam, because you will not be selecting relevant case notes. You will not be meeting the requirements of the task. Simple as that. Okay, last one for writing. Dr. Alpha, please, can you shed some light on the types of letters? Yeah, so most commonly for nurses, doctors at least, it will be a referral letter where you'll be writing to another professional, which is pretty straightforward. You may also get a discharge letter. That means that there's been a patient with you and you're sending them back to where they came from, typically a nursing home, for example, something like that. So you would be, but very little changes here. I really can't see any significant differences between the letter types. The other one is the transfer letter. Let's say you've got a patient in a particular ward in the hospital and you're sending them to the oncology unit, for example. So you're writing a transfer letter. The only real difference you need to worry about in between those letter types really is the introductory paragraph might mention referral, discharge, or transfer explicitly. It will say those words. And then, of course, in the requests are going to be different, because if you're writing a referral letter, you're going to be requesting specific help from a professional. If you're transferring, there'll be a specific sort of request for that transfer to take place. Or if you're discharging, there'll be a request in that discharge letter, like maintaining medication or make sure that blah, 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 blah. To be honest, though, not much of a difference between the letters. I wouldn't worry too much about them. And again, there's no set structure or pattern for each of those letter types. All right, cool. Let's push on now. Let's ask some questions about the reading and listening sections of the test. Just last thing on writing is that you can go into e2language.com and get feedback on one letter if you want. I think it's $19 US. One of our expert teachers will grade your writing, give you some comprehensive feedback. That's not a bad thing to do. Even if your writing is already excellent, even if you're a native speaker, just again, I've seen people make terrible mistakes, like people who have excellent English already, not bothering to do any preparation, going in without preparing for the test and failing because they haven't done a simple thing like gotten some feedback on their writing, and then it costs them another $500. It costs them a month in waiting, and probably more importantly, it costs them in mental anguish because they've, it's not fun failing these exams. Please don't do that. Okay. 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 All right. Nobody's asking reading and listening questions. So let me just quickly outline what happens in this test very quickly. So in listening, there are 3 sections, 3 subtests. The first one is a fill in the gaps type of subtest where you'll listen to a consultation between a medical professional and a patient. You need to write down words specifically that the patient says directly. No transformation, no paraphrasing, words directly from that patient's mouth. You'll get 2 of those. They're pretty straightforward. Listening part B, you'll get 6 multiple choice questions. Each multiple choice question has a very short audio of about 30 or 40 seconds. There'll be 3 answer options, A, B, or C. There'll be a context statement that says something like, can I remember how to do this? Yeah, it'll say something like, you hear a nurse talking to a doctor about Mr. Smith. And then it says, now read the question. And the question will say something like, what does the nurse think the doctor should, what does the doctor think the nurse should do? And then there'll be 3 answer options. So you get 6 of those. They're pretty tough. You need to listen carefully. If you haven't seen the methods lessons just on YouTube, and if you're preparing a day before your test, please just watch E2 language videos. Honestly, that's probably the best thing you can do. Listening part C is longer. It's multiple choice, but it's a longer multiple choice. There'll be a monologue, one person speaking, or a dialogue. Again, watch the YouTube videos if it's your last day to prepare. Reading part A. In fact, I'm not even going to describe it anymore. If you don't know what it is by now, you're probably in trouble. Here we go. Okay, great. Priya, can you please suggest the best strategy for reading part A and part C? Okay, let's talk about reading part A. In reading part A, you get 4 texts based on a certain medical topic, let's say headaches. The texts differ slightly. One will be about symptoms, one will be about medications, one will be a graph showing the difference between males and females and their headache intensities, and one will be a definition of a particular type of headache, something like that. Then you have 20 questions, right? The first set of questions are matching questions, and they always start by saying, in which text can you find information about, and then it'll say something, it'll give you a clue. And the idea here is that you have to scan your eyes over. You're not reading carefully, you're reading very quickly, and you're saying that information is located in text C, for example, and you write A, B, or C, or D. Easy. Next ones are gap fill, and the next ones are short answer questions. So what's the best strategy here? Watch the YouTube video watch the E2 language YouTube video, or go into the platform and watch it there, and do the practice if you've got an account on E2 language. I'm not going to describe it to you. It's all there ready for you. Cool. Reading part C is more detailed reading. It's multiple choice, but it requires you to read very carefully for specific information, general ideas, opinions of the author, etc. Make sure you read that question prompt very carefully. Okay, Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge says, Jay, in the OET test, are they real people talking, or are they computerized voices? As some of the material that I find on the internet has like robot voices. That's because it's bad material. Honestly, you need to be very careful with the preparation material you choose for OET. OET material is extremely difficult to write and write well. If you want to create a set of questions that actually mirror the real exam, good luck. It is seriously tough. The only sources that I recommend are OET official materials and E2 language materials. Honestly, I've seen so much rubbish and junk out there that just be careful with the materials that you choose to prepare with, because they may actually be unhelpful. I can't really answer any questions on the reading or listening section for some reason. I think it's just best if you go on, if it is the day before your test, check out the YouTube videos by E2 Language. Really, I think that's the best thing you can do now. If your test is in a month's time, then I strongly suggest that you sign up at least for the Express package on e2language.com. In fact, I'm going to give it a plug right now. If you need help, guys, with your OET test, go to e2language.com. It's 100% online. Every day, 7 days a week, twice a day, we run live classes like this, where one of our expert teachers will be delivering a listening part A mock test, or a reading part B mock test, or a writing mock test for nurses, for example. Twice a day, 7 days a week. Plus you get the materials. If you upgrade, you get writing feedback, you get tutorials, methodology lessons, lots and lots of cool stuff there. This website here, e2school.com, we built this for people who were struggling with their OET test or with their IELTS test. We built this e2school.com for people who require more fundamental English skill training, like grammar, pronunciation, vocabulary. Because if you have been failing this test, more than likely, it's not because you don't understand the test. I'm sure you understand what to do and the methods, but you probably lack those skills, those listening skills, the vocabulary, the pronunciation skills, etc. So both of these websites together are very good for your preparation. If you're already feeling comfortable and confident with your language, just check out e2language.com. Or if you need to build your fundamental basic skills, check out e2school.com. Yeah. Cool. All right. I think that's about all. I'm starting to fade away. I think I need to have a little sleep under my desk, but I hope that was helpful. Yes. So Jay Garcia asks, Jay, do you do some writing feedback? Yes. Check out e2language.com. We do one-off writing feedbacks or as part of a package. Dr. Alpha says, Jay, I love you 3000. I love you too. Dr. Alpha, thank you. I don't know what 3000 means, but that's good. I'm into that. Cool. All right. I think that's all. I'm going to leave it there. Thanks very much for coming along. Remember to sign up to e2language.com for all of your OET preparation needs. And if you're on YouTube right now watching this and you're not yet a subscriber, click that subscribe button. We're close to 100,000. So that would be cool if you can help out with that. Ta-ta. Bye.